and a firm among many others. So it's a great pleasure today to welcome Ashton Kutcher to Twilio Engage. Welcome, Ashton.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here, and I apologize about the informal nature of my knit cap today. It's just cold here, so I don't have any excuses.
Must be a cold day. Well, look, it's been a while since we first met. We first met probably, I don't know, almost 10 years ago because we held a hackathon at Twilio headquarters, and we brought together a bunch of developers, and you, from the perspective of Thorn, the organization that you started to fight internet sexual exploitation of children, and you basically brought this big problem in front of the developers. You said, look, the internet is enabling child pornography and other exploitation, and we're here to stop it. And you all are developers, like, you know so much about like the technology. I'm going to present you the problems that we see, and I want you to use your best creative problem solving to stop one of the worst thing that's happening in our society. And I thought it was such an amazing way for you to frame for a room full of developers who showed up because they care, but to actually like not tell them like here's what to go build, but actually to frame it for them. So I remember that hackathon so clearly and how you unleashed a lot of creativity in that room. So Ashton, can you first just tell us a little bit about Thorn? Why did you found it? What's the mission?
Thorn is a nonprofit that is focused on building software to fight the sexual exploitation of children so that every child can be a kid. Um, in founding it, I guess the motivation behind it is a well-known person. You often get invited to this event or that event or this event to raise awareness of a bunch of various issues. And after doing that, I saw what Bono was doing with Red, and how he focused his energy specifically on this issue, and used his superpower of the fact that everyone knows who Bono is, to convene people around solving one particular issue, and made extraordinary strides with that. And I really admire him, and have looked up to the things he's done in nonprofit, and felt like I kind of went in search for an issue that I could do something similar around, and came across this issue that had a lot of people that cared about the issue, had a lot of people that were working on it, but no one was working specifically on how to utilize technology to fight back against something that people were utilizing technology that was built with very good intentions, but with a lack of belief that people would utilize it for such a nefarious activity.
And a lot of people don't necessarily know this about you, Ashton, but you're like you built a very technology approach to Thorn. You're an engineer by education, if I remember correctly.
Well, I mean, I didn't graduate, but I'm an engineer by interest, for sure. I went to school for biochemical engineering, and then dropped out to be a model, which is the next logical step that you take when you're trying to engineer an easier life.
Yeah, as biochemical engineers tend to do. But so you've always been really close to technology and the engineering discipline, even though you decided to become a model. But you have a long history of also being like an investor in technology companies, and you've invested in a bunch of amazing companies like Uber, Skype, Airbnb. And so I'm curious to hear like your perspective as a technologist, which is a role that a lot of people don't necessarily know you for. What gets you excited about new technologies or new companies or new ideas that you see in the market, you end up investing in?
So I find investing to be a very personal endeavor. That I think that the thesis that we have at Sound Ventures is invest in the future that you want to see, and invest in other people's happiness. And I think everyone has a unique personal definition to what does invest in happiness mean. For me, I would say that the person I think about the most when I'm considering investments is my father. I grew up in a lower middle class family in Iowa. And when I was growing up, I didn't see my dad very much. And I didn't see him very much because he cared so much about me that he was working wire to wire and sleeping very little. Like he spent all of his time working just to keep a roof over our head and to put food on the table and to meet the needs of our family. And I think when I look at investments, I think about my father and other people like my father, and think about would this tool be useful to him, or would this tool be useful to someone like him? Because I know he wanted to be with us. I know he wanted to spend time with us. He just couldn't afford to. And functionally, whether we're looking at a SaaS company or a consumer product, I really just think about software as a tool, and it's a tool for efficiency, and that efficiency can give you time back. And so I guess I'm still, even as a grown up, trying to get more time with my dad. And when I see investments that I go, whoa, this would have been a game changer. Airbnb would have afforded my family the opportunity to go on a vacation when we couldn't afford to stay in a hotel. We could have likely stayed in an Airbnb, or we could have rented out an extra room to help pay for our mortgage. So that's probably the lens that I look for companies through, and it tends to be the general focus that I have as I look at things.
So technology allows us to live better lives.
Yeah, I have a thesis that true luxury is being able to afford to take your time. And, we think about what it means when we receive like a handwritten letter. Like somebody was afforded the opportunity to take their time, and they gave you the time that it took them to write that handwritten letter. It means more. You watch people go through Central Park on a horse and carriage, and it's a leisurely thing that they can afford to do. And to me, extraordinary tool. I remember being a kid and working as a roofer with my dad when I was like 10 years old. I was up on a roof helping shingle roofs. And I remember the day that we got an air nailer and went from, hammering every single nail in an asphalt shingle on a roof. And suddenly that air nailer came along, and this beautiful piece of technology, and we could just pop, 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 and we would finish a roof that would take us, a week to finish in 2 days. And the efficiency that created, and the sort of economic escape velocity that created for our family, was extraordinary. And it's no different with software. With the right tool, you can create those types of efficiencies that create opportunity.
And speaking of efficiency, we've just come off of, we're still in the middle of a pandemic. We came off of 2020, a year in which we realized how important communication technology was to enabling us to stay connected with each other, to enable us to do business more safely, to allow a lot of businesses to stay open with things like contactless delivery, or even seeing healthcare providers over video, or things that many of us never did before. And I'm curious, because it seems like connection has also been a part of your investment thesis and your belief in technology. And in particular, one of the investments that you've made and you've been involved in is community. Can you tell us a little bit about the company Community? Because I think that it's so interesting, that you've taken such an active role, an investment role, but it can truly change the way people are engaging at scale in a very personalized one-to-one way, which seems like another area that you've been focused on.
Yeah, I remember when I first got on Twitter, however long ago, and I'd been on MySpace, and I've been on Facebook, and I've been on these other social platforms, and I remember this extraordinary moment of being able to connect with people one to many, and what that meant from a democratization of media standpoint, and democratization of truth, as we've become so inundated with over the last year, or last several years, really. But I was fascinated by this sort of the ability to branch from one to many and then instantly go one to one, in a response cycle, but yet have that one to one be broadly broadcasted so that those debates could be had in public. And I always thought that was fascinating. But the thing that was missing from that is you didn't know who was on the other side of that conversation. And so you didn't know whether you were talking to a teenager in the Midwest or a grandparent in the UK. There was sort of no way to know that, understand it, and so you couldn't speak to people where they are and on their level. And functionally, what makes social fabric strong is the things that we have in common, and the ways that we can connect through commonality. So when I saw this platform community come across, I was exhilarated and fascinated. One, in an ecosystem where everyone's starting to get app fatigue, like I've got an app for this and I've got an app for that, and I've got and one of the biggest points of friction for growth for many social companies is just getting people to download the darn app. So much is spent on that. The first thing that fascinated me about community was that the creation side has an application that you utilize, but the read side of the equation is straight to text message. So while the creators of content on the platform are utilizing the app to create, the consumption happens through your SMS messenger, whatever that might be. And I thought that could break open a giant growth potential for the company. So I thought that was very interesting. But the more interesting thing is the capacity to message, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people at the same time, very broad messages, but then take that mass consumer potential and really isolate down to the geography that someone lives in, to the age that they are, and to the interests that they have, and be able to create sub-communities inside of this messaging platform that were specific to people's interest graph, to their age, to their geography, and speak to them on their level, on whatever that may be, or speak to them through the commonality that we may have. So I can, through this mass messaging platform, I can speak to just people in Iowa that are 18 years old and likely graduating high school this year, which would be a very different message than I would send to someone who is in San Francisco creating a startup, or whatever it might be. And I was reminded of a speech that I heard when I was studying Steve Jobs for the movie that I did about him, where he was talking about the power of Apple is that they were unleashing this technology, and it could be used by school teachers and children and grandparents and post office workers, and I was reminded of that on a social level, that the technology is now for everyone, and if you can't speak to people on the level that they connect with you on, you don't really have a relationship. You're just talking at the masses, and I'd rather talk to people and with people than at people. It seems to be a more humanizing experience.
Yeah, there's a societal impact of this idea that everyone's talking in mass, many people talking to many people. And the challenge with that is that like you don't have real connection because it's a performance. Everyone is trying to score points in these conversations, and it ultimately ends up people yelling and creates a lot of division. But in one-to-one settings, you can actually engage for real and get to know people. And it's not about scoring points. It's about actually dialogue, which is what human beings are. Like our brains are designed to do that. Our brains aren't designed to speak on a stage of billions of people. We can't fathom the impacts, and you're always going to offend someone, and that's why everything in the internet turns into a flame war. And this ends up being really useful, not just for like societal impact and things like that, but also for you building a direct connection with your fans, but also for companies. So many people watching this are business people, and they're creating startups, or they've got large businesses, and they're asking like, how do I create genuine connection with my customer? And the answer is like, you're going to tweet to 1 million people, or are you going to actually one-to-one build a relationship that's tailored? How have you found it? You were one of the first users of Community, and you kind of were the beta tester, if you will, putting your Community phone number out there in your Twitter profile and putting it out in the world, inviting everyone to text you. How have you found it has resulted in real use of creating that one-to-one connection with your fans?
So at first it was slightly overwhelming. To be totally transparent, in so much as I would send something out and then I would have 100,000 people that were all, because we're used to the medium of text messaging being one of the most intimate mediums of messaging in our life, it was 100,000 people all feeling as if they're having an intimate conversation. And I couldn't possibly reply to all 100,000 messages. I mean, I technically could, but I would have to reply with the same message to all 100,000 if I were going to do that. Over time, we've built some beautiful NLP that allows us, as replies come in from a message, to stack the replies into common replies. So, of 10,000 people that I target a message to, if 200 of them all have a similar question or reply, I can then isolate those 200 individuals, reply to them collectively, go to the next one where maybe there's 50 in common messages, then reply to those, and create true dialogue with a large collective. The real beauty of it is it's a conversation not being had in public. So the only people that are seeing that message are the people that I am messaging. It is not being put out for collective fodder to be torn apart. So a lot of the trolling and sort of negative consequence of, especially for companies, I would think is like a lot of companies use Twitter or other services to run customer service. Why are you having your customer service conversations out in public where you just get piled on as a company?
You don't want that.
It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So the beauty of it is that those responses come private. Only I see it, and people that have extraordinarily negative things to say about me, which there are quite a few, they don't get energy if I don't respond. Nobody else is going to respond to the fact that they texted me this message, and so it eliminates a lot of the doxing and trolling and negative feedback loop. I try to continue. I read it because I think it's important. I read everything. I've always said that if you believe the good things that people have to say about you, you're then forced to believe the bad things that people have to say about you. And so I try to take either extreme on the spectrum with a grain of salt, and sort of personally compute it to understand where I can improve and get better and be a better human. But nonetheless, you don't have these sort of pile-on scenarios that get really ugly really fast, which is nice.
Yeah, so for someone building a business online, you're like, well, first of all, I don't want the pile-on. I don't want my brand to be like the subject of, lots of controversy, and you want to keep your customer service requests out of the public view. But you also, on the flip side, want to build genuine one-to-one connection with your customers in a way that you can't do in a mass way. And it's a trend that I see across so many of our customers is I say, look, we're trying to personalize our services for each one of our customers. We're trying to build genuine connection with our customers so they feel invested in the relationship with the company, because that makes them better customers. It makes them more loyal, right? And it's probably the same thing that you're doing.
And even if you're, if you're operating in a consumer in the consumer space, it's extraordinarily valuable, because you're going to speak with different people different ways, as you should as a brand. Your brand doesn't have to be one voice to everyone all the time, because brands are really a reflection of how the consumer sees you. It isn't how you are, and this is how everyone sees you. Everyone has a different perspective in the theater of your brand, and so being able to speak with someone relative to what your brand is, relative to how they see your brand, is very important. But also even in the SaaS space or the enterprise space, you may have large enterprise clients, you may have SMBs, you may have SMBs in various verticals, and being able to speak to their vertical. If your SMBs are restaurants and dental offices and whatever other companies might be, being able to speak to their problems that are specific to them, in isolated silos, and build sub-communities that you can do so with, becomes extraordinarily valuable. But I don't want this to be just an advertisement for a community. I think it's more a testament to the underlying infrastructure of what you built, that allows for a company like Community to do this.
Well, it's like the underlying principle is really true. Building genuine connection. The other underlying principle that seems like is a constant throughout your life, a lot of your investments, the nonprofit stuff you've done with Thorn, is you're a big believer, it seems like, in building, right? And obviously at Twilio, we're big believers in that too, given that developers are our customers, companies who believe that developers, helping them to build the future of their companies, owning their roadmaps, being able to take an idea that you hear from your customer and actually go build it, instead of saying like, well, sorry, that's not what the product does. Like, that builder ethos is really important to us. And it seems to be to you as well. Like Thorn is like a technology company, a nonprofit, community. Like, you've been very involved in building that company and that product. And I'm curious to hear, like, as you go through, what do you look for as the opportunities to build? And what do you see, like, when you see an opportunity to build, like, how do you react to that? And like, what do you think that businesses should think about when they are asking, like, well, should I build this thing or should I buy this? Like, do you have any thoughts that the lens that you've used through the years, either for your investments or whether it's Thorn or Community, and how you've thought about, here's when you pick up your tools and when you build?
So, that's a very large question. The first thing I do is I try to parse what is my core business offering, and I believe anything that is within my core business offering, I should build unequivocally. If it's touching my customers from a product level, I should build. There are a ton of ancillary things that a company can buy that are things that the core company benefits from the collective knowledge base of an external source. So let's take payroll for existence, right? Or for example, like, I could be an extraordinary technology company, have an unbelievable offering, but I don't think I would go out and build my own payroll system, because there's probably benefits in not having that in-house. Take R&D tax credits. I wouldn't want to build that in-house.
Because your customers care about those things.
Well, it's not ultimately touching the customer. It's benefiting the company, but not benefiting the customer. If it's functionally in the benefit of the customer, I think that you build it. I fundamentally believe that in the next 10 years, if not sooner, every company will be a technology company with a product offering to some degree. And to take it one step further, um, I, I believe that at its core, every company is a fintech company with a product offering on top of it, and that would be a broader thesis going forward. And
Say more, because like fintech is the business model of the company, essentially.
the advantages of a company, no matter what your product offering being, uh, looking at themselves and thinking of themselves as a fintech company, um, I believe provide the opportunity for uh, exponential growth and exponential margins. That and and I believe that the services are inbound that will allow that to be the case. We're on the precipice of those services being so simple to implement that not having developers that are driving your underlying fintech opportunity within your company will leave so much capital on the table that somebody else will come in with that and then have extraordinary strategic advantages based on their margins to grow their business and drive their product margins down while driving their fintech margins up. Uh, it's, and thus shift the landscape of you may have a disruptive product, but if you don't have a disruptive company, your disruptive product will get disrupted by somebody else that has the same disruptive product but better underlying fintech technology that allows them to drive their margins down for the product offering, and you get Amazoned, so to speak.
That sounds like we should have a longer conversation about this at some point. It sounds like a whole session on every company is becoming a fintech company would be a great one. In fact, we just saw what, like, Reddit gets monetized by people trading stock, basically.
Oh, I mean, like, this is the most, by the way, this is an insane moment in time that's happening right now with this. I mean, the retail investors are playing, are forcing, like running a short squeeze on institutional investors. This is bananas.
And just coordinating on a Reddit forum. Amazing.
But never before, this is the power of communication. Never before in the history of humanity have enough retail investors been able to coordinate an effort to short squeeze an institutional investor because they didn't have the individual capital, but collectively they do. This is the first proceeding of this. It won't be the last.
This is going to be wild. All right, let's move on. So Ashton, one of the things that I've always observed about you is you always come off, first of all, as really excited, really in the details, like the shit you're talking about, and really genuine and authentic. And I'm curious. So you probably, I don't know if you conceptualize of yourself as a leader, because you got a lot of followers on social media. You're an actor, so everyone knows you, and you therefore can impact so many other human beings because of that. And that's something that a lot of the people watching today, they're leaders. They're leaders in their companies. They're leaders in their communities. And so I'm curious to hear, you're operating at this scale. How many followers do you have? Like millions? I don't know.
I don't know.
Okay, you got lots of followers.
I genuinely don't know. I mean, we could go look, but I don't know.
It doesn't matter. What matters is, how do you think about showing up as an authentic leader, whether it's, in, social media or acting or, investing? How do you conceptualize your role as a leader, and how do you show up authentically into all those settings where you need to show up?
The two questions. Once again, you're conflating questions, and I like the way you do that because it forces the bigger idea. Question one is on conceptualizing myself as a leader. I don't know that I have a clear perspective on that, other than you can hurt more people by making smaller statements or smaller actions. When people are looking at what you're doing, I feel a responsibility that if someone is, if a lot of people could mimic or would mimic an action or a behavior that I take, I feel the responsibility of that. Like, and I think if anything, it's just made me a more thoughtful person. I used to speak a lot more freely because I didn't feel like there could be a consequence to me saying something. And now if I say something that leads people in a direction or indicates to people that it's okay to do something, I can do a lot more collective damage. Conversely, I can do a lot more collective good if I make thoughtful decisions, and so those are the two sides of that coin, and I think it forces me to rethink a lot of the things that that I consider doing. I've actually gotten quieter because I used to kind of just say whatever I was thinking, and now I put I stutter now, which I never did before, and I stutter because I'm always editing what I'm going to say before I say it, to ensure that what I'm saying is responsible. So that's one side. On the authentic side, I'm just so far from being the person that I want to be. I can be such a better human being. And I know it. And when I run on the treadmill, I always see the future me doing so much better than what I'm doing. And I think that when I run on the treadmill of life, I see the same thing. And I guess people see vulnerability as authenticity. And I believe that if we walk into a room and we are our true vulnerable selves, we gain trust of other people, and so many people are so busy with this mantra of fake it till you make it, that they can't access their own vulnerability. And mine is always right here.
I like that a lot. I mean, no one puts on a veneer that is vulnerable, right? Like the veneer you put on is one to mask those things, mask the concerns you have. But if you're open about that, people see that. They see that and they want to engage with you in an authentic way. And that approach really resonates with me. And like, even right there, like you're modeling it by being vulnerable about saying how vulnerable you are and how much better you can imagine yourself being. And like that right there really speaks to an authentic Ashton. So thank you for that. We're just about out of time. I did want to ask one more thing. Like in our audience today, there's a lot of startups, there's a lot of founders. And you've met a ton of founders. You've worked with a lot of startups. You've invested in a whole bunch of them. You've met a lot of founders, very famous founders now who've built amazing companies. What's the one piece of advice that you'd give to the founders or the startup leaders that are in our audience today?
One piece of advice. Well, I just read this book, Adam Grant's new book called Think Again. Um, I would recommend for founders to read that, because there's a chapter in it where he's talking about they did a cohort sample of two different groups of people that were all uh, building startups, and one group was had one perspective that was um, just ingrained in what they were going to build, and the other group r- ran their company like scientists, where they made a hypothesis and then they tested the hypothesis and looked for evidence that the hypothesis was right. And if the hypothesis was wrong, they made a new hypothesis, continued down the line until they gradually built something extraordinary. And if you want overnight success, um, go play the lotto. Don't build a company, because it's a grind, it's hard work, and it's being willing to be wrong a lot and learning to get excited about when you're wrong, because that means that you're growing.
Proving things that aren't true is just as valuable as finding the things that are. It's one step in the process.
Indeed.
Love it. Experimental mindset. Experimentation is the prerequisite to innovation. Thank you so much, Ashton.
And don't forget to measure. If you don't measure things, you can't improve them.
What do they say? Like a scientist is just an engineer who writes it down, or something like that. I forget the exact statement, but yes. One of our values actually at TWLO is write it down. For a lot of that reasons. Keep your lab notebook and show your homework, and that's the way that you actually can convince your colleagues, or to actually take people along on that ride. Ashton, thank you so much for being with us today.
This has been a really pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Really fascinating conversation. I'll invite everybody here to the future session starring Ashton Kutcher. Every company is becoming a fintech company. I'm excited for that one. But in the meantime,
you have to bring in a guest for that one. I have somebody that you could bring in that can do better, to speak to that better than I can.
It's a great hypothesis. I really want to learn more. But in the meantime, every company is becoming a software company, and every company does need developers to build software. That I'm absolutely convinced of. And we can't wait to see what you all build. Thank you again, Ashton. It's been a pleasure having you here today for this really far-reaching conversation, and everybody have a great day.